What's going on, my babies? Welcome back to another episode of the Spiritual Word. As always, I apologize for any noises in the background in advance and anything of that nature. And before I start these, I like to start these off with a disclaimer by stating that these are for entertainment purposes only. Always do your own research, check them to your own conclusions, to have your answers, and I believe in your ability to do so and to be your own person. So, I didn't upload last week or yesterday, which I apologize for. I felt it was necessary to take a break, and I didn't upload on yesterday because I tried to upload, but the synchronicities were blocking me. Like, the sometimes I do these over just because I feel like it's not super duper clear and concise, or as clear and concise as I would like it to be. So I do them over, and I started to do one over, and the one that I actually really, really liked, and the one that I actually wanted to post, the mic turned off. So only the audio version of this podcast got the information that I was giving out. And so I took that as a kind of like, okay, don't upload this one. And, we can worry about uploading tomorrow when the time comes. And so with that being said, before I start these, I have an audio version of the podcast anywhere you can find audio podcasts, and I have a video version of the podcast on YouTube. They're both named The Spiritual Word. I'm your host, Jackie. I upload Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Mountain Time. And if science, psychology, spirituality, self-help, and philosophy are things you're interested in, I don't know if I said that twice. If those are things you're interested in, those are my main 5 topics. So, with that being said, you should subscribe or follow whatever platform you're finding me on if those are topics that you find to be interesting. So, in the last couple of episodes, we were reading Start Where You Are by Pema Chodron. So, I'm just going to continue to read chapter 8 and 9 because I didn't upload yesterday. So, I feel like we should catch up and read both chapters just because the book itself is not a long book, so the chapters are pretty short. And that's why I'm going extremely fast so that I can get through both of these chapters. So, with that being said, thanks for being here, my babies. If you're new, welcome. I call my viewership my babies because I find that to be an endearing term. And if you're a returning baby, thanks for being here. You know that I love you and I appreciate you. So let's jump right into chapter 8. Drive all blame into one. I like to talk about another bit of slogan, drive all blames into one. When we say as a previous slogan, when the world is filled with evil, it means when the world is filled with the results of ego clinging. When the world is filled with ego clinging or with attachment to a particular outcome, there's a lot of pain. But these painful situations can be transformed into the path of the Bodhi. One of the ways that we can do this is to drive all blame into one. See how this works, let's look at the results of blaming others. I had someone buy me the New York Times on Sunday so I could look at the results of people blaming others. In Yogi Slavia, I don't know how to say that. Yugoslavia. There's a very painful situation. The Croats and the Serbs were murdering each other, raping each other, killing each other's children and old people. If someone you asked on either side what they wanted, they would say they just wanted to be happy. The Serbs want to be happy, and they see the others as enemies. But they think the only way to be happy is to eradicate the source of the misery. As we all think this way. And then if you ask the other side what they wanted, they'd say the same thing. This is true in Israel with the Arabs and the Jews of the north and the Jews. This is true in Northern Ireland with the Protestants and the Catholics. This is true everywhere. And it's only getting worse. Every corner of the world is the same, is true. When we look at the world in this way, we see that all it comes down to is the fact that no one is encouraged to feel the underlying anxiety or the underlying edginess, the underlying soft spot. And therefore, we think to blame others is the only way. Reading just one newspaper, we can see that blaming others doesn't work. We look at our lives as well. How are we doing with our Juans and Juanitas? Often, there are people with whom we have the most intimate relationships, and they get to us because we can't just shake them off by moving across town or changing seats on the bus, but whatever we have the luxury of doing with mere acquaintances, whom we also loathe. The point is that if we think there is any difference between how we relate to people who irritate us and the situation of the northern England, the Middle East, or Somalia, we're wrong. If we think that there's a difference between the way that Native people feel about white people or white people feel about black people or any of these situations on Earth, we're wrong. We have to start with ourselves. If all people on the planet would start with themselves, we might see quite a shift in the aggressiveness, energy, and what is causing the widespread Holocaust. Drive all blame into one, or blame yourself. If you prefer, it sounds like a masochistic slogan. It sounds like just beat me up. Just bury me under the pile of manure. Just let me have it and kick me in the teeth. However, that isn't what it really means. You'll be happy to know. One of the ways that we begin to practice to drive all blame into one is to begin to notice what we feel when you blame someone else. What is actually underlying under all that talking and conversation about how wrong somebody or something is. What does blame feel like in your stomach? When we do this, we notice the things we notice. When we do this, noticing what we see, what we are, somehow beginning to cultivate bravery, we encompass. We cultivate bravery as well as compassion and honesty. When there is really unresolved issues in our lives, when those really unresolved issues in our lives come up when we're no longer trying to escape but are beginning to be curious and open towards these parts, drive all blame into oneself is a healthy and compassionate instruction that short circuits the overwhelming tendency that we have to blame everybody else. It doesn't mean instead of blaming other people, you blame yourself. It means to touch in with the blame, with what the blame feels like altogether. Instead of guarding yourself, instead of pushing it away, instead of pushing things away, begin to get in touch with the fact that there is a soft spot underneath all that armor, and blame is probably one of the most perfected armor that we have. You can take the slogan beyond what we think of as blame, and practice it applying it simply to the general sense of something is wrong. When we feel that something is wrong, let the storyline go and touch in on what's underneath. You may notice that when you let the words go and stop talking to yourself, there's something left. That something tends to be very soft. At first, it seems very intense and vivid, but as you don't recoil from that, you keep opening your heart, you find that the underlying neath of all that is. You find that underneath all of the fear that is called, there is a shaky tenderness. The truth of the matter is that even though there are teachings and techniques, we still have to find our own way. There is really. Hold on. What does it really mean to be open? What does it mean to not resist? What does it mean? It's a lifetime journey to find answers to these questions for yourself. But there's a lot of support in these teachings and this practice. Try dropping the object of blame or the object of what you think is wrong. Instead of throwing snowballs out there, just put the snowballs down and relate to the non-conceptual way. Relate in a non-conceptual way to the anger. Relate to your righteous indignation. Relate to your sense of being fed up or pissed off or whatever it is. If Mortimer or Juan or Juanita walks by, instead of talking to yourself for the next 4 days about them, you would stop talking to yourself. Simply follow the instructions that you're given. Notice that you're talking to yourself and let it go. This is the basic Samantra Vipassana instruction. What does it mean by dropping the object? Then you can do the Toglen. If you aren't feeding the fire of anger or the fire of craving by talking to yourself, then the fire doesn't have anything to feed on, and it peaks and passes on. It's said that has a beginning, middle, and end. But when we start blaming and talking to others, things seem to have a beginning, middle, and end. And no end. Strangely enough, we blame others. Hold on, let me grab this. Sorry. Strangely enough, we blame others and put so much of our energy into the object of anger or whatever it is because we're afraid that this anger or sorrow or loneliness is going to last forever. Therefore, instead of relating directly with the sorrow or loneliness or anger, we think that the way to end is to blame somebody else. We might just talk to ourselves about them, or we might just actually hit them, or fire them, or yell. Whether we're using our mind, our body, speech, mind, or all three, whatever we might do, think, curiously enough, this will make our pain go away. Instead, acting out makes it last. Driving blame onto oneself is saying, instead of always blaming others, own the feeling of blame, own the feeling of anger, own the feeling of loneliness. Make friends with it. Use the Toglen practice to see that you can only place the anger or the fear and the loneliness in a cradle of loving kindness. Use the Toglen to learn how to be gentle to all of that stuff. In order to be gentle and create an atmosphere of compassion for yourself, it's necessary to stop talking to yourself about about how wrong everything is, or how right everything is for that matter. A challenge to experiment with is dropping the object of your emotion, doing the Toglen, and seeing if the fact of the intensity, your emotion doing Toglen, seeing if in fact the intensity of so-called poison lessens. So-called poisons lessens. I have experimented with this because I don't believe that it works. I thought that it couldn't possibly be true because my doubt was so strong. For a while it seemed to me that it didn't work. But as my trust grew, I found that what happens, the intensity of klesha lessens. And so does the duration. This happens because ego begins to be ventilated. So this is a big, solid. So this big, solid me, and I have a problem, I am lonely, I am angry, I am addicted, begins to somehow be irradiated. Aerated. Irritated. When you just go against the grain and own the feelings yourself instead of blaming others. The one in drive all blame into one is the tendency we want to protect ourselves, ego clinging. We all drive all blames into this tendency by owning our feelings and feeling fully. Ongoing monolithic me begins to lighten up because it is fabricated with our opinions, our moods, and a lot of our ephemeral. I don't know how to say that word. But at the same time, vivid and convincing stuff. I know 15-year-old Hispanic guys from Los Angeles. He grew up in a violent neighborhood and was in gangs till the age of 13. He was really smart, curious enough. His name was Juan. He came on really mean. He was tough and he snarled and he looked around with a big chip. He walked around with a big chip on his shoulder. Hold on. You had the feeling that was all he had going for him. His world was so rough, and acting tough and mean was the only way he saw to survive in it. He was one of those people who definitely drives all blame into others. If you asked him a simple question, he would tell you to fuck off. If he could get anybody in trouble, he definitely would do so. From one's point of view, he was a total pain in the neck. But on the other hand, he had a flair, brilliance about him. It was always mixed. You hated him, you loved him. He was outraged, also sparky and funny, but he was mean and would slap others and push them around. You knew that was pretty lightweight compared to what he would used to do at home. What he was used to doing at home, where they would kill each other on a regular basis. He went to Boulder, Colorado for the summer to give him a break, to give him a nice summer in the Rocky Mountains. His mother and the others were trying to get a good education and somehow step out of the nightmare in which he had been born. The people he had been staying with were loosely affiliated with the Buddhist community, and that's how I came to know him. One day he came to the Chogun Rinpoche, where Chogun Rinpoche was, and at the end of this event, Chogun Rinpoche sang the Shambhala anthem. This was an awful experience for the rest of us because, for some reason, he loved to sing the Shambhala anthem in a high-pitched, squeaky, cracked voice. This particular event was outside. As Rinpoche sang into the microphone, the sound traveled for miles across the plains. Juan broke down crying and started crying. Everyone else was feeling awkward and embarrassed, but Juan started crying. And he later said he cried because he had never seen anyone that brave. He said that guy, he's not afraid to be a fool. That turned out to be the major turning point in his life because he realized that he didn't have to be afraid to be a fool either. All that persona, the chip on the shoulder, were guarding his soft spot, and he could let them go because he was so sharp and bright. He got the message. His life turned around, and now he got his education. He's back in LA helping kids. So the point that we tend to drive all blame into Juan, because Juan is so obnoxious, we aren't encouraged to get in touch with what's underneath all the words of hatred, craving, and jealousy. We act them out again and again. But if we practice the slogan and drive all blame into Juan, the armor of our ego clinging will weaken and the soft spot in our heart will appear. We may feel foolish, but we don't have to be afraid of that. We make friends with ourselves. Now, so that was chapter 8. I'm going to go into chapter 9. Chapter 9, to be grateful to everyone. The slogan of be grateful to everyone is about making peace with the aspects of ourselves that we have rejected. Through doing that, we also make peace with the people we dislike. More to the point, being around people we dislike is often the catalyst for making friends with ourselves. Thus, be grateful for everyone. If we were to make a list of people that we don't like, people we find obnoxious, threatening, worthy of the concept, we would find out a lot about those aspects of ourselves we cannot face. If we were to come to come up with one word of each of these troublemakers in our lives, we would find ourselves in a list of descriptions of our own rejected qualities. If which we project on the outside world. The people who repel us unwillingly show us the aspects of ourselves we find unacceptable, which otherwise we can't see. In traditional teachings on Lojong, it is put another way. Other people trigger the karma that we haven't worked out. They mirror us and give us a chance to befriend all of the ancient stuff that we carry around like a backpack full of granite boulders. Be grateful to everyone is a way of saying we can learn from any situation, especially if we practice the slogan with awareness. The people and situations in our lives can remind us to catch our neurosis as neurosis. To see when we are in our room under the covers, to see when we pulled the shades, locked the doors, determined to stay there. The reason that we can learn from everything, you have the basic wisdom, basic intelligence, basic goodness. Therefore, the environment is supportive and encourages you to be brave and open to your heart and your mind. You'll find yourself opening to the wisdom and compassion that's inherently there. It's like tapping into the source, tapping into what you already have. It's the willingness to open your eyes, your heart, and your mind to allow the situation in your life to become your teacher. With awareness, you are able to find out for yourself what causes and miseries and what causes happiness. Be grateful to everyone. Is getting to a complete change of attitude. This slogan is not wishy-washy and naive. It doesn't mean that if we're mugged on the street, you should smile and knowingly say, "Oh, I should be grateful for this," because before losing consciousness. This slogan gets at the guts of how we perfect ignorance through avoidance. Not knowing that we're eating poison. Not knowing that we're putting on another layer of protection over our hearts. Not seeing through the whole thing. Be grateful to everyone means that all situations teach you and often are the toughest ones that teach you the best. Because, hold on, there may be a Juan or a Juanita in your life, and Juan and Juanita is the one who gets you going. They're the ones who don't go away. Your mother, your husband, your wife, your lover, your child, the person that you have to work with every single day. Part of the situation you can't escape. These situations really teach you because there is no pat solution to the problems. You're continually meeting your match. You're always coming into the challenge, coming up against your edge. There is no way that someone can tell you exactly what to do because you're the only one who knows where it's torturing you. Where your relationship with Juan and Juanita is getting into your guts. Others don't know. They know when you need to be more gentle. They know when you need to be more clear, when you need to be quiet, when you need to speak. No one else knows what it takes for another person to be open, to be the open door. For some people, speaking out is opening the door a little wider. For other people, it's being still. Being still is opening the door a little wider. It all has to do with what our ancient habitual reaction is. Being in a tight spot and going to the to soften the whole thing because you usually have a change of attitude. Hold on, I need to reread that because what? It all has to do with what your ancient habitual reaction is to being in a tight spot and what is going to soften the whole thing and cause you to have a change of attitude. It's Juan and Juanitas who are present with us with these dilemmas, these challenges. Basically, the one way you can communicate with the one and Juanitas in your life is by talking and teaching and practicing very personally, not trusting anybody else's interpretation, because you yourself have the wisdom within, and you yourself will find out how to open the door. As much as we would like one and Juanita to get our lives to get out of our lives and give us a break, somehow they stick around, and even if we do manage to get rid of them, they seem to reappear in another name and another face very soon. They are addressing the point at which we are most stuck. It is important in terms to be grateful to everyone, to realize that no slogan, no meditation practice, nothing you hear in a teachings is a solution. They're evolving. We will always be learning more and more, continually opening further and further. It is good to open our minds so that each situation is completely fresh. It is as if we have never been there before, completely new take. A completely new take. But even with this approach, we can get trapped. Let's say that you're a meditation instructor and your student arrives for a meeting, and because you're very open and in tune, something magical happens, and there is some real communication between the two of you. And you can see that something has helped. Something has gone through, and the connection with her heart. She leaves, and you feel great. Wow, I did a wonderful thing. I could feel it. The next person comes, and you forget about the freshness because you were feeling so good about what you did. He sits down and talks to you, and you come out with the same answer that you just gave the last person. But that just leaves a new person cold. He couldn't care less. You have the humbling experience of realizing that there is never just one solution to a problem. Helping others or helping someone has to do with opening and just being there. That's something happens between people because it's a continual process. That's how you learn. You can't just open once. What you learn from one and Juanitas, what you learn from the one and Juanitas of your life is something that you can get a patent on and sell as a sure thing that it will always work. This isn't like that. This kind of learning is a continual journey of wakefulness. A meditation student was working with whom I called Dan has a serious alcohol problem and drug problem. He had been making great strides, and then he went on a binge. On the day I found out about it, I happened to have an opportunity to see Tro 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 True Rinpoche. I blurted out to him how upset I was that Dan had gone on a binge. I was so disappointed. Well, Rinpoche got really angry. It completely stopped my heart and mind. He said that being upset about Dan's binging was a problem. You should never have had expectations for other people. Just be kind to them, he told me. In terms of Dan, I should just keep helping him, keep walking forward, inch by inch, and be kind to him, invite him for dinner, give him little gifts, and do anything to bring some happiness to his life instead of having these big goals for him. He said that setting goals for others can be aggressive, really wanting a success story for ourselves. When we do this for others, we are asking them to live up to our ideals instead of just being kind. The main point of be grateful to everyone, the dig, is that you want to get rid of the situation that drives you most crazy, the one in Juanita's. You don't want to be grateful to them. You want to solve the problem and to not hurt anyone. One is making you feel embarrassed or degraded or abused. There is something about the way that he treats you that makes you feel so bad that you want out. The slogan encourages you to realize that when you've met your match, you've found your teacher. That doesn't necessarily mean that you shut up or don't say anything and just stand there and breathe in and out, although that might be exactly what you do. The Toklan is much more profound than that. It has to do with how you open in this situation and the basic goodness of Juan and Juanita and your basic goodness beginning to communicate. Something between repressing and acting out is what's called for. But it is unique and different each time. People have wisdom to find. People have the wisdom to find it. Juan and Juanita have the wisdom that you Juan and Juanita have the wisdom, you have the wisdom, everyone has the wisdom to get to know how to open. It's inherent in all of us. The path of not being caught in one's ego is the process of surrendering to situations in order to communicate rather than win. Compassionate actions, compassionate speech is not one shot deal. It is a lifetime journey, but it seems to begin with the realization when Juan and Juanita is getting to you, pushing every button. It is not simplistic as just eating it, being a worm. Okay, let them attack me. On the other hand, it's not easy to saying it is not as easy as it is to say, I'll get him. It's a challenge. This is the no appear in everyday life. The unanswerable question in our lives, the greatest teachers. When the great Indian Buddhist teacher Tisha went to Tibetan, he had been practicing the Lojong teachings for some time. Like most practitioners, he had the feeling of being haunted by the fact that there are blind places that you don't know about. You know that you're stuck in certain places, so he valued Juan and Juanita's in his life tremendously because he felt that they were the only ones who got through to him enough to show him where the blind spots were. Through them, his ego got smaller. Through them, his compassion increased. The story that Atisha was told that the people of Tibetan were very good-natured, earthly, flexible, open. He decided he wouldn't be irritated enough to push his buttons, so he brought along with them a mean-tempered, ordinary Bengali tea boy. He felt that was the only way he could stay awake. In Tibetan, the Tibetans like to tell stories. When he got to Tibet, he realized he needed not to have brought the tea boy. The people there were not as pleasant as he had been told. In our lives, the Bengali tea boy are the people who, when we let through the front door of our house, go right down to the basement, where you store a lot of things you rather not deal with and pick out one of them and bring it to you and say, is this yours? These are the people who have habitual styles of working just fine with everyone. Everyone's agreeing with you to say, no way I'm going to go along with what you just asked me. I think it's stupid. you think, what do I do now? And usually what you do is get everyone else on your team. Just sit around and talk about what a creep this person who confronted you. If the disagreements happen to be in the realm of politics or isms of any kind, you would get a banner on which you would write how right you are or how wrong the other person is. By the time this other person has got a team too, then you have a race riot, a World War III righteous indignation becomes a creed for you and for your whole gang. And it starts a whole situation about how somebody blew your trip. It turns into a cascade of who's right and who's wrong. Wars come from that. Nobody ever encourages you to allow you how to feel. Allows you to feel wounded. Hold on. Nobody ever encourages you to allow yourself to feel wounded first. And then to figure out what the right speech, what the right action might follow. Gear the Jeff, a teacher in early part of the 20th century, a crazy wisdom character, knew the meaning of the slogan. He was living not too far from Paris in a major house, with a big lawn. All of his students came there to study with him. One of his main teachings was to be awake whatever the process you're going through. He liked to tighten on screws. He liked to tighten the screws on his students. In fact, it said that they would make you take the job that you didn't want to take. If you thought you would be a college professor, then he would make you become a used cars salesman. There was a man in the community who really had a bad temper. He was everyone's one. Nobody could stand the guy because he was too prickly. Every little thing caused him to spin into a tantrum. Everything irritated him. He complained constantly, so everyone felt they needed to tiptoe around him because everything that might be said could cause him to explode. People just wished he'd go away. And Gurdjieff liked to make his students do that thing that were completely meaningless. Like to make his students do things that were completely meaningless. One day, they were about 40 people cutting up a lawn into little pieces and moving it to another place on the ground. This was a little too much for this fellow, and he had his last straw. He blew up, stormed out, got in his car, drove off. Whereupon there was spontaneous celebration. People were thrilled, happy, so happy he had gone. But then they were told, but when they told Gurdjieff what happened, he said, "Oh no," and went after him in his car. 3 days later, they both came back. And that night, when Gurdjieff's assistant was serving him supper, he asked, "Sir, why did he bring him back?" Gurdjieff answered in a low voice, "You're not going to believe this. And this is just between you and me. You must tell no one I paid him to stay here." I told that story at a meditation center, and later they wrote me a letter saying, "We used to have 2 people here helping. There was a lot of harmony. Now we have 4, and the trouble is beginning. So every day we ask each other, is somebody praying? Is somebody paying you to be here?" Okay, that was chapter 9. I'm gonna end this here just because this shit's already extremely long. But I hope that this was helpful in any way, shape, and form. And as always, my babies, thanks for being here. Sorry that I didn't upload yesterday. And tomorrow we'll go into chapter 10. And I think I might do 11 as well, just because I kind of want to finish this book. But 11's kind of long, so it's going to be a longer episode. I think it'll probably be like an hour episode. But yeah, thanks for tuning in and tapping in. I hope that this was helpful in any way, shape, and form. And as always, my babies, I love you. And I'll see you in the next one.